to the Objective Opinion, and this week we highlighted the Nixon Action Network and the President Barack Obama's coming to Brooklyn. Well, okay, this time was Manhattan. We want to give a large shout out to Al Sharpton and the Nixon Action Network, and we're going to take y'all guys into these clips right now. I'm tired, and besides, my daughters and them driving me crazy. Kids.
And this has been framed by the President as a year of action. And he has been an action president. No president in the last 50 years has shown more action around protecting the rights of ordinary citizens and the civil rights of people denied than our action president, Barack Obama. I'm not talking about style, I'm not talking about rhetoric, I'm not talking about who would high-five us, I'm talking about action. Affordable health care was action. I'm talking about private sector jobs every month was action. I'm talking about equal pay for women, Lilly Ledbetter was action. He didn't play us cheap, he brought us action. And that is why I'm proud to bring you at the National Action Network, the Action President.
Al's not the only guy at the stop. We've got Barbara Arnwine here today, and we want to thank her. Cleo LeBron, thank you. Melanie Campbell, thank you. Mark Morial, thank you. We got members of Congress, state and local officials from New York. And of course, we've got all of you. So thanks to all of you for such a wonderful role. Everybody sit down. Al doesn't know how to get back to his seat. Somebody help out, please. But don't make him jump over it. Okay, they're going to explain it. There we go. All right, you're going to be all right. Now, the last time I was here was 3 years ago. That's right. And a few things have changed since then. I am here as a second-term president. I have more gray hair. It's all right. Let's see what else. I've got twice as many dogs. I'm glad I won't have to serve a third term. 3 dogs is too many. I can't become promising to lead a session. Another dog. Of course, one thing that has not changed is your commitment to the cause of civil rights for everybody, an opportunity for all people. And that's been something that's been on my mind this week. Some of you may know that yesterday I was down in Austin, Texas at the LBJ Library to speak on the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act and the man who signed it into law. And standing there, I thought of all the Americans, known and unknown, who made it possible for me to stand in that spot, who marched and organized and sat in and stood up for jobs and for justice. And I thought of all who achieved that great victory and others, not just with respect to the Civil Rights Act, but the Voting Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act and immigration reform and Medicare and Medicaid and the first battles of a long war on poverty. Over the past 5 years, in the wake of the worst economic crisis of our lifetimes, we've won some victories too. Businesses over the past 4 years. 7.5 million Americans signing up to buy health care coverage under the Affordable Care Act. And millions more who gain coverage through Medicaid and CHIP and young people being able to stay on their parents' plans. The rate of uninsured Americans is down. High school dropout rates are down. Our high school graduation rate is the highest on record. More young people are earning college degrees than ever before. We've made progress and we've taken action. But we also know our work is unfinished.
That's right. That's right.
Too many Americans working harder than ever just to get by.
Yes.
Too many Americans who aren't working at all.
Amen.
We know we have to do more to restore America's promise of opportunity for all people, particularly for communities hardest hit by the recession, particularly for those who struggled since long before the recession. Not only African Americans and Latinos, but Americans trapped across the country in pockets of poverty, inner city, suburban, rural. And we know what opportunity means. Opportunity means more good jobs to pay good wages.
Yeah.
Opportunity means training folks for those jobs.
Yeah.
Opportunity means changing the odds for all of our children through the pre-K, something Mayor de Blasio's fighting for here in New York City. Second, opportunity means affordable higher education for all who are willing to work for it. Opportunity means answering the call to be my brother's keeper and helping more boys and young men of color stay on track and reach their full potential. Before I came out, I was in a photo line, saw my good friend Freddie Haynes, a great pastor from the great state of Texas, and he told me this summer they're going to hire 100 young men, paying $10.10 an hour, maybe $10.50. As a consequence of this call, and the point is that my brother's keeper, that's not just something I do, that's not just something the government does, that's something everybody can participate in. Because we know these young men need support. Opportunity means making the minimum wage a wage you can live on. It means equal pay for equal work. It means overtime pay for workers who burn it. It means continuing to extend the right of quality, affordable health care for every American in every state, because we've got some states that aren't doing the right thing.
That's right. Yeah, we should.
We have states who, just out of political spite, are leaving millions of people uninsured that could be getting health insurance right now. No good reason for it. If you ask them what's the explanation, they can't really tell you. And by the way, making sure our citizens have the opportunity to lead healthy lives also means dealing with things like dangerous carbon pollution that's disproportionately affecting low-income communities. It means making sure that our young people are eating right, so listen to Michelle. I'm just saying. So we know we've got more work to do to bridge the gap between our founding ideals and the realities of our time. And the question then becomes, well, how do we actually make these changes? How does it happen? How do we get a minimum wage bill passed? How do we make sure that those states that aren't yet implementing the Affordable Care Act actually are doing right by their citizens? It means being vigilant. We've got to be vigilant to secure the gains we've made, but also to make more gains in the future. And that's the meaning of these last 50 years since the Civil Rights Act was passed. Because across the country, right now, there are well-organized and well-funded efforts to undo these gains. And one of those gains is under particular assault right now, and that's what I want to spend the rest of my time here talking about. Just as inequality feeds on injustice, opportunity requires justice, and justice requires the right to vote. President Johnson, right after he signed the Civil Rights Act into law, told his advisors, some of whom were telling him, well, all right, just wait. You've done a big thing now. Let's let the dust settle. Don't stir folks up. He said, no, I can't wait. We've got to press forward and pass the Voting Rights Act. Johnson said, about this there can be and should be no argument. Every American citizen must have an equal right to vote. Voting is a time when we all have an equal say. Black or white, rich or poor, man or woman. Doesn't matter. In the eyes of the law and in the eyes of our democracy, we're all supposed to have that equal right to cast our ballot to help determine the direction of our society. The principle of one person, one vote is the single greatest tool we have to redress an unjust status quo. You would think there would not be an argument about this anymore. But the stark, simple truth is this. The right to vote is threatened today in a way that it has not been since the Voting Rights Act became law nearly 5 decades ago. Across the country, Republicans have led efforts to pass laws making it harder, not easier, for people to vote. In some places, women could be turned away from the polls just because they're registered under their maiden name, but their driver's license has their married name. Senior citizens who've been voting for decades may suddenly be told they can no longer vote until they can come up with the right ID. In other places, folks may learn that without a document like a passport or a birth certificate, they can't register. About 60% of Americans don't have a passport. Just because you don't have the money to travel abroad doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to vote here at home. And just to be clear, I know where my birth certificate is. It's still on my website somewhere. You remember that? That was crazy. I hadn't thought about that one. Now, I want to be clear. I am not against reasonable attempts to secure the ballot. We understand there has to be rules in place. But I am against requiring an ID that millions of Americans don't have. That shouldn't suddenly prevent you from exercising your right to vote. The first words put the paper in our American story tell us that all of us are created equal. And we understand that it took a long time to make sure that those words meant something. But 50 years ago, we put laws in place because of enormous struggles to vindicate that idea, to make our democracy truly mean something. And that makes it wrong to pass laws that make it harder for any eligible citizen to vote, especially because every citizen doesn't just have the right to vote, they have a responsibility to vote. So, yes, we're right to be on guard against voter fraud. Voter fraud would impinge on our democracy as well. We don't want folks voting that shouldn't be voting. We all agree on that. Let's stipulate to that, as the lawyers say. But there's a reason why those who argue that harsh restrictions on voting are somehow necessary to fight voter fraud are having such a hard time proving any real widespread voter fraud.
That's right.
So I just want to give you some statistics. One recent study found only 10 cases of alleged in-person voter impersonation in 12 years. 10 cases. Another analysis found that out of 197 million votes cast for federal elections between 2002 and 2005, only 40 voters out of 197 million were indicted for fraud. Now, for those of you who are math majors, as a percentage, that is 0.00002%. That's not a lot. So let's be clear. The real voter fraud is people who try to deny our rights by making bogus arguments. There have been some of these officials who've been passing these laws have been more blunt. They said this is going to be good for the Republican Party. Some of them have not been shy about saying that they're doing this for partisan reasons. Now, it is wrong, President Johnson said, deadly wrong, to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote. It is wrong to change our election rules just because of politics. It is wrong to make citizens wait for 5, 6, 7 hours just to vote. It is wrong to make a senior citizen who no longer has a driver's license jump through hoops and have to pay money just to exercise the rights he has cherished for a lifetime. America did not stand up and did not march and did not sacrifice to gain the right to vote for themselves and for others, only to see it denied to their kids and their grandchildren. We don't pay attention to this. Folks from Chicago know, Crider knows, one of the first jobs I had out of law school was to lead a voter registration project in my home state of Illinois. We registered more than 150,000 new voters. And as an organizer, I got to help other citizens exercise their most cherished and fundamental rights. That mattered to me. As president, I'm not going to let attacks on these rights go unchallenged. We're not going to let voter suppression go unchallenged. Earlier this week, you heard from the Attorney General, and there's a reason the agency he runs is called the Department of Justice. They've taken on more than 100 voting rights cases since 2009. They've defended the rights of everybody from African Americans to Spanish speakers to soldiers serving overseas. Earlier this year, a bipartisan commission I appointed, chaired by my election lawyer and Mitt Romney's election lawyer, came up with a series of modern or common sense reforms to modernize voter registration and to curb the potential for fraud in a smart way and ensure that no one has to wait for more than half an hour to cast a ballot. States and local election boards should take up those recommendations. And with the 50th anniversary of Freedom Summer almost upon us, I urge members of Congress to honor those who gave their lives so that others could exercise their right and update the Voting Rights Act. Go ahead and get that done. Do it because the right to vote is something cherished by every American. We should not be having an argument about this. There are a lot of things we can argue about. But the right to vote. What kind of political platform is that? I mean, why would you make that a part of your agenda, preventing people from voting? How can you defend that? There are a whole bunch of folks out there who don't vote for me, didn't vote for me, don't like what I do. The idea that I would prevent them from voting and exercising their franchise makes no sense. Black or white, man or woman, urban, rural, rich, poor, Native American, disabled, gay, straight, Republican or Democrat. Voters who want to vote should be able to vote. Period. Full stop. Voters not a Democrat issue, it's not a Republican issue, it's a citizen's vote. It makes our democracy strong. But it's a fact. This recent effort to restrict the vote has not been led by both parties. It's been led by the Republican Party. And in fairness, it's not just Democrats who are concerned. You know, you had one Republican state legislator point out, I'm quoting here, making it more difficult for people to vote is not a good sign for a party that wants to attract more people. That's a good insight. Right? I want a competitive Republican Party, just like a competitive Democratic Party. That's how our democracy is supposed to work, the competition of ideas. But I don't want folks changing the rules to try to restrict people's access to the ballot. And I think responsible people, regardless of your party affiliation, should agree with that. If your strategy depends on having fewer people show up to vote, that's not a sign of strength. That's a sign of weakness. And not only is it ultimately bad politics, I believe ultimately it harms the entire country. If voting is denied to the many, we risk ending up stuck year after year with special interest policies that benefit a fortunate few, and injustice perpetuates inequality. But remember, injustice perpetuates inequality, justice opens up opportunity. As infuriating as the efforts to roll back hard-earned rights can be, the trajectory of our history has to give us hope. The story of America is a story of progress. No matter how often or how intensely that progress has been challenged, ultimately this nation has moved forward. As Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, it bends towards justice. We move forward on civil rights, and we move forward on workers' rights, and we move forward on women's rights and disability rights and gay rights. We showed that when ordinary citizens come together to participate in this democracy we love, justice will not be denied. So the single most important thing we can do to protect our right to vote is to vote. I'm going to make one last point here. We're going to have an attorney general that looks at all the laws that are being passed.
That's for the media.
We're going to have civic organizations that are making sure that state laws and local laws are doing what they're supposed to do. We will fight back whenever we see unfairly the franchise being challenged. But the truth is that for all these laws that are being put in place, the biggest problem we have is people giving up their own power. Voluntarily not participating. The number of people who voluntarily don't vote, or are eligible to vote, dwarfs whatever these laws are put in place might do in terms of diminishing the voting rolls. So we can't treat these new barriers as an excuse not to participate. We can't use cynicism as an excuse not to participate. Sometimes I hear people saying, well, we haven't gotten everything we need. You know, we still have poverty. We still have problems. Of course. These things didn't happen overnight. When I was down in Texas, everybody's celebrating the day that the civil rights law was finally passed. Remember, there were decades in which people sacrificed and worked hard. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it happens as long as we don't purposely give our power away. Every obstacle put in our path should remind us of the power we hold in our hands each time we pull that lever or fill in that oval or touch that screen. We just have to harness that power. We've got to create a national network committed to taking action. We can call it the National Action Network. So, I want you to go out there and be all here. Help more folks to get their rights. Get those souls from voting.
Innocent look guilty. And the guilty look innocent. Why? Because they can control what you think. I get off the train at Penn Station and I go to the newsstand, and the first thing I see are two publications here in New York, and the face of my brother, Al Sharpton, and comedic, cartoonish, derogatory, insulting positions. One is supposed to be a conservative paper, and the other is supposed to be a liberal paper. To him in a derogatory term and says he's not a big cat but a bit rat. And then you walk into the National Action Network convention on the first day, and it's as if they just wasted paper printing that story to begin with. And the other thing, all of you can be journalists. Because today, anybody can blog, you Facebook and you tweet, like even news organizations use your tweets. They use, I mean, what's a photojournalist today? Anybody, if I ask all of you right now to hold up a camera, raise your hand. There's nothing that's going to be said or done that can't be photographed in this room today. And it, depending on the photograph. So that I want to start with that. Number two, there's no such thing anymore as the fairness doctrine. The fairness doctrine was gone with Reagan. That was when, if I did a show and I had a conservative on, I had to have a liberal on. And if I had a Democrat, I had to have a Republican. And you had to give them equal time. Those days are over. Let's understand that. They're over. Number three, and I think I can keep this within time. Here's what the important role is going to be, and I'm going to tell you. Journalists better learn to call a spade a spade. You know, I'm getting sick and tired of Ted Nugent being interviewed as if he has some kind of credibility. If a black man said what Ted Nugent said about a white president, he would be persona non grata. You cannot put somebody on TV who calls the President of the United States a mongrel and a half human being, and then expect that that person has any kind of credibility whatsoever. And then there's no follow-up question to suggest that isn't that what the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazis used to say about Jews and about black folk years ago. That's the other part. The other thing, and then also, well, y'all quit be so afraid to call race race. Come on. What Congressman Louis did to Eric Holder was saying the equivalent of saying, boy, I'm going to put you in your place. And the boy said, I'm not a boy, I'm a man. Don't you go there, buddy. It's all the same thing with Elijah Cummings. But you know, a single commentary or journalism, and I go on, you know, one of the reasons is because there's a connection there. We understand there's an age thing there. We've seen this game before. We know that the folks are talking in the abstract, and they're talking, and commentators talk around the race. It's anything but race. And then let me also point out something, and that is about this election. Here's the real deal. If you don't get out and vote, and the United States Senate changes hands, President Obama will be impeached.
Yes.
All right. We're gonna.
No, let me finish. Remember, only thing keeping him from being impeached now is a Democratic Senate.
Right.
If that Senate becomes controlled by the Republicans and the House is controlled by the Republicans, I guarantee you we are here right now and in Washington, D.C., There are articles of impeachment that are already on paper. And let me point out something. Impeachment is a trial. It's an accusation. Then the impeachment is an indictment. Then the trial goes to the Senate. And if the Senate is majority Republican,
You know what's gonna happen.
and you may say, well, maybe he'll luck out. And be like Clinton and luck out. But excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, this is about legacy. Well, yes, and I'll close on this. The first black president was elected, but the hell, we impeached him. That's what is at stake in 2014. Nothing